Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Essential Skills for Humaning. I am excited to welcome Kris Ward. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Christina.
Well, I love this topic, and I can't wait for us to have conversations about, we'll call it like unitasking, not multitasking.
Single tasking.
All
single
of that stuff. Yes, single tasking. Yeah, thank you. So before we dive into that, though, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Yeah. So I started my business 14 plus years ago, and my focus when I started was market messaging. And the first couple of years I was working, oh my gosh, I worked insane hours, Christina. And my husband said I was always stealing from sleep, getting up earlier and earlier, staying later and later. And so I was told about the 2-year mark that I was starting to lose some of my charm. And I thought, oh my gosh, this cannot be. I mean, he's my biggest fan. He's, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Supporting me in everything I do. This just cannot be. And I was exhausted all the time, right? So I literally went from working 16 hours a day down to 6. Now that did not happen overnight. That's a whole story on its own. But luckily I did, because a couple years after that, he was diagnosed with colon cancer and I was pulled away from the business for about 2 years. When I returned after his passing, my existing clients had no idea of my absence. It was just not how we navigated his journey. We were very positive in nature.
Wow.
And so they kept coming to me and saying, like, how could we have not known you were away? Like, how could that have been? And if you can do that, maybe you could help us, spend time with our family and friends and get to our kids' soccer games. And so I started working with them under that capacity. And I realized really quickly that the people who needed me most looked really good on paper. They'd been in business or their career 5-10 years. They, whatever, they maybe had a book or a podcast and do all these things, but they're working way too many hours for where they are at this point in their journey. And so we start working with them with their team, their time, and their toolkits. And we help find, hire, and onboard virtual assistants for them. And then we teach them our signature super toolkits. And they all tell us that they get 25 hours back a week within the first month of working with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's winning the hour and winning the day.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. So, there's so many places to start. I really want to start on multitasking, because that's a pet peeve of mine. Because it used to be like a badge of honor for me, like I'm a multitasker. And I think more and more people are becoming aware of these days that it's not, a good way to do things. But maybe for those that are still holding on to, I'm a multitasker, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just did a presentation for Microsoft, their international, it was over 400 people from around the globe on a call. And we talked a lot about that. And yes, multitasking does decrease your productivity by 40%. And if you are like me, I thought for some reason, oh my gosh, you don't understand. I care so much about my work. I'm so disciplined that somehow my brain is exempt from all science that was studied at Stanford and Harvard. And you don't understand. I care so much. That doesn't apply to me. But, there's a whole bunch of things. Studies show us again and again that not only is multitasking less productive, but the more you multitask, it's the one thing in the world that the more you do, the less good at it you are. You get worse and worse and worse, right? There's decision fatigue, there's attention residue, all these things just deplete you. And if nothing else, there was this study done. It was fascinating. It was I think 1,112 judges, and they did it over an 8-month period and 10-month period, right? It was 8 judges, 10-month period. And they did, sorry, I got my numbers all mixed up here. Here we go. Start over. Reset.
A lot of judges.
And they did 1,112 parole cases. Okay.
Wow.
Over a 10-month period. And what they talked about with decision fatigue, and these people weren't even really multitasking, but decision fatigue is something that happens when you hop in around and you just burn through your decision fatigue, because we make around 35,000 decisions in a day before we sort of really do our work. Right. So anyhow, these judges saw over 1,000 cases over a 10-month period. And they showed again and again that these judges had a lunch break and one snack break. And by the time they got, if you got to be in front of that judge right after a break, your chances of parole were 65% better. The ones right before the break, when they're worn down from decision fatigue, was close to zero. And they showed this again and again. And these were academics, and this is the only thing that they did, and they're professionals. And so in my very convoluted example with bad numbers, what I need you to understand is if that impacts the one thing they had to do, when you're hopping all over the place, doing all kinds of crazy things and reacting in your business, you have to be sure that you're making poor choices and making mistakes and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So no multitasking.
No.
Stay focused.
Yeah.
Now, I know I jumped right into multitasking, but
Yep.
is there like an overview you'd like to give about win the hour, win the day?
I think the overview, win the hour, win the day came from when I originally really started to lean in and teach people how to use their calendar. And 90% of people use their calendar as a memo board. It's a productivity tool and they don't know how to use it, right? So that's really why we focus on your team, your time, and your toolkits. And I think the big three is your team. First of all, a team is a philosophy, not a number. So you can have a virtual assistant for $5 an hour doing amazing things when they are set up correctly. And not you've turned them into a task puppet and you're delegating, because delegating is a lateral move. The work still has to come through you. And that's why it seems like more effort and it's bottlenecked and it's like, I could just do it myself, because you're delegating. So you don't want to be delegating. You want a different setup. And the setup comes into hand to hand with our signature super toolkits, which are very different than SOPs. So many of us follow the standard model we've seen in the corporate world that we were taught on in some job, whatever job you had. And those SOPs were not written by the end user. They were static in nature. They're there to cover liability. And the whole setup in the corporate world is very parentified. Your manager checks your work like a parent checks a child's homework, that kind of thing. Whereas when we do these little scrum meetings with our team about 15 minutes in the morning, it's a very collaborative thing. I show up and I feel like I've got exceptional peers, and so do my clients. When they're showing up with their team, whether it's one person or two or three, they're like, oh my gosh, I have people I can lean on now. I've got peers. And it's incredibly affordable and very doable if you have the right infrastructure in play.
Yeah. Okay, so for those, we'll call them individual contributors, right? So the individuals, maybe they're in college, maybe they're working for an employer, maybe they're in business for themselves, like you and I.
Yeah.
What would be like the one thing that if they instituted today would really help them step up their productivity while also not, stressing them out?
Yeah. So what I would say is learn how to use your calendar. So with your calendar, there's a couple of things. I call it your time bank account. So whether you're going to college or you have a career or you have your own business, what happens for most of us is we put outside forces on our appointment. So on our calendar. So you might say, Christina, like, okay, I've got this appointment with Kris. It's on my calendar. I know I have to be there. Fantastic. Excuse me. And then I'll say to other people, hey, you need to have your work on the calendar, or they'll say, well, no, I do that every day. I don't need to remember that. I have to do that every day. Well, this is not a memo board. And to that point, I would argue that's like you saying to me, well, my car payment comes out every month, so I don't count it. And I'm like, well, that money's gone, right? So my argument is when you don't put your own work on your own calendar, you may stumble into the day thinking you have 8 hours when in fact you might have 5. So there, you're in a hot mess, right? So understanding that it's your time bank account is number one. Understanding that to-do lists are percolating lists of emergencies and they just stress you out, Zeigarnik effect, open loops, cause you all kinds of anxiety, incomplete tasks, back to multitasking. And then another thing I would talk to you about is using what I call your win hour. That first hour of the day when you're starting to work, that work requires you should use for the most attention or focus. You don't want to waste that on emails, going in all different directions, burning through your decision fatigue, giving yourself attention residue. And attention residue, if you can imagine this, often I'll do this when I'm doing a video. I'll show like I've got a piece of paper and then I spray shaving cream on it and then I wipe it off. And there's obviously, if you can imagine that, there's a whole bunch of shaving cream left behind.
Yeah.
That left behind is your attention residue. If I'm over here, Christina, and then I hop on my email to check something before this call and I come back, I don't come back with the same amount of depth and focus that I had before I hopped over there. You lose attention residue. So you want to start your day with the work that requires the most attention or focus. And then also science shows us that when you do this, that big project, that deep focus the same time every day, you pick up quicker where you left off versus if you did it Monday at 11 and Tuesday at 4, Wednesday at whatever noon, you have to reorientate yourself and figure all this out. So those are some really key productivity hacks that would get you off on a good start. And there's one more, if you bear with me, is what I call working. Okay. There's one more I call working backwards. We do this in our personal life, but yet we don't do it in our professional life. So working backwards, Christina, would be like, okay, I have to be at the in-laws Saturday at 1 for somebody's birthday. They're an hour away, so we have to leave at noon. So it means I have to get ready at 11. Okay, I'm going to go to the gym. All of a sudden you're saying, hey, I got to be up at 9 to be somewhere at 1. You worked backwards.
Yeah.
With our professional life, what happens is we get a new project or new ambition or new assignment. We get all excited and we dive in. But we don't have a plan. So we don't know when we're off course. And so many people will say, but I kind of don't know how long this will take. Well, you better have some idea, right? Yeah. So what I would say to you is when I wrote my book, Win the Hour, Win the Day, I realized that it was going to be about 100 plus pages. And so I worked backwards. I had to have it to the editors by June, or she couldn't do it till September. So in that scenario, I looked and it was like I had to do 5 pages per day, Monday to Friday, to meet that goal. Now,
nice.
This is why books never get written, because even the old me would have been saying, hey, you know what? It's raining today, or I'm tired, or the printer broke, or I had this big meeting, or we got this big sale. There'd be a whole bunch of good reasons why today didn't happen. But tomorrow, the pages will fly off the computer. It's going to be magical, right? But here's the thing. Because I was using my win hour first thing in the morning, because I knew I had 5 pages, when I looked and thought, I don't know if I have 5 pages in me today. Well, if I don't have 5 pages in me today, do I have 10 in me tomorrow? No, I do not. So that kept me sober and clear.
Nice.
And that would be very easy to see how off course I would be. Or if I let's say, get sick with a cold, I'm in bed for a day, then I know, oh my gosh, next week I have to do 12 pages per every day. Where it would be really easy to go, oh my gosh, I had a cold last week. That's fine. I'll just work harder next week. But I would never know how off course I was or when that book would be done or anything like that. So if you learn to use your calendar as a time bank account, if you used your win hour, the first hour of the day, for the work that requires most attention or focus, if you learn to work backwards, that will just be a game changer for you.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm also hearing in this, because I love this too, is you've got to set up these systems to work for you.
Yeah. And systems.
Can you say a little bit more about systems?
Systems can be a heavy word. They sound really restrictive, but they're actually quite freeing. So the idea that I always say, if you worked one day with me, you'd hear me say, business is not run on memory. There is never a time somebody I work with should say, oh my gosh, I forgot, right? Or to a better example, I was sitting with my cousin who's got some sort of horrible, boring office accounting, high position job for the government or something. I don't know. She does really big accounting stuff for mutual fund stuff. It just sounds like a prison sentence to me, but she apparently likes it. That's fine. So she's there, and she said she was sitting there one weekend. She had to fix something because of the end of month or whatever. And she said, just give me a minute. She said, this is a struggle. I only do this once a month. So every month I have to relearn it. And I'm like, okay. So with our signature super toolkits, what makes them really different is the language, clarity, and ease of use. And then what happens is you don't use up your brain power to remember stuff. Because science will also show us, even if you do something all the time and there's 7 steps to it, you will remember 4, and then you have to search for the other 3. And that takes up brain power. So our signature super toolkits are really about creating dynamic breathing documents that constantly give you back time. But if you don't work with us, very simple steps allow you to just go and take a look at that. I mean, oh my gosh, how many of us have a cookie recipe or something we make all the time? And yet we go and we look at the recipe every single time. Right. Yes, I remember that now. But if you had to, look at the ceiling, how many, a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, like what? You know what I mean? So it can be very freeing, but the word systems has really been bastardized. And when you're working with us, it's actually fresh air. It breathes life back into your business and gives you back your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, I don't mind the word system and I love them. Like anytime I'm developing something, like say a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Create a system for reaching out to the guest, producing, reaching out after, releasing it, like a system for everything. It just makes things run so much more smoothly.
Yeah. 100%. And then you're not walking to the bathroom in the middle of the night and all of a sudden you almost, smack your head. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Like that extra step, or I answered that email and I didn't go back to do that other thing. Like it's hard on the heart.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and so I have a question for you, and there may not be an answer to this one, but I don't know. I think you might have one.
We'll try.
Yeah. So that the win hour.
Mm-hmm.
So what if you have competing things? Like, for example, for me in the morning, that is my best time. For most people, right? I'm focused, I'm ready to go, but that's also my best time. So for work, but it's also my best time for exercise. Because if I don't do it in the afternoon, I'm not going to do it. So thoughts there. How do we win the hour with competing priorities?
Okay. The first hour at work is your win hour. I'm not counting your morning routine, and absolutely I exercise in the morning. It is your first hour at the desk is your win hour. I had a client who was starting with me and she was so funny. God love her. She had a little Southern drawl and everything. And she's like, so she had, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but she had heard this from other gurus, get up earlier and do all this. And I'm not subscribing to that at all. This is not what I'm saying. I don't care.
Like the power hour thing.
No. Yeah. I'm not, if you start work in the winter, I often start work at 10. So my power hours from 10 to 11, that's fine. So she was saying, okay, for the longest time, she was getting up 5 a.m. and now she was trying to get up at 10 to 4, whatever. And she said, when she started to work with me, she said, Kris, I cannot get up any earlier than 4. I just can't. And I said, what the heck are you talking about? Are you, what, this is not what we're doing here. Right. So cut to, she works with us. We get her a VA. We put some things in play. She was running a business and having helpers homeschooling 2 boys with special needs.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, like you really, the less time you have, the more you need us. Right. So cut to then now she gets up 6:30 and gets done what she couldn't get done before. And she kept thinking the only answer, like, my husband said to me, is stealing from sleep more and more. But no, absolutely. I think exercise sets you up for the day. I'm a big proponent of it for sure. Yeah. Do that. And then your win hour is when you start your workday.
Yeah. Oh, and that's tough too. Like, cause I am ready to go, like not long after I'm awake.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, do I use this, to go to work and get everything done? Cause we don't, probably like you and I, we have very flexible schedules unless we have client work first thing in the morning.
You know what?
So it's just tough.
What helps me is I read a book and I knew the name of it, forgot it. And what they were saying, and this, but it's a good reminder. They were saying if exercise had no impact on your body whatsoever, what it does for your brain would be worth it. Right. Yeah. So that's where when I started my business working those crazy hours in the beginning, it was the first time in my life that I didn't exercise because I was just so exhausted and nauseous and being tired all the time. I could barely get myself dressed. I didn't choose not to exercise. It just fell to the wayside, which a lot of my clients, they come to me and all of a sudden these things that mattered fell to the wayside. And I thought I was doing that for my business, but I looked like a heroin addict, frankly. I looked exhausted. My hair looked stringy. I was tired. It was just awful. But what I would say to you is that's the best gift you can give your business is vitality, clarity. Do that first. And it's non-negotiable. So no, I am not asking you to compromise your exercise.
Oh, I don't want to. But
No.
it's just sometimes it's like, I feel like I could get so much done right now, but I need to go exercise. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Now, I know people are going to want to learn more. Obviously, they need to read the book too. So can you share a little bit about your products and or services and how people can get the book, etc.?
Well, we have a gift for your audience. So if they go to
Ooh.
www.freegift from Kris, KRIS.com, free gift
Ooh.
from Kris.com. I have a free audio version there. So you can do that. And you can always find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, if you're just looking to take anything, I mean, we really, people hear us talk a lot about entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, small business owners, but the corporate world has come to us, and apparently I always thought what we did was so anti-corporate that they wouldn't be interested, but apparently they're interested. So we do work with professionals and teams and stuff like that. So yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and say you heard me on this fantastic podcast, and just ask me questions, because I'm here to help. I truly believe your business and your work should support your life, not consume it.
Absolutely. Well, and I can absolutely see why corporate would want their employees more productive and happily engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So what is your final piece of advice for our audience?
I just say it again and again. Business should be fun, whether it's business or your profession. It should be fun. And it should support your life, not consume it. That is it. It's just like, you mentioned my husband. Well, he wasn't sitting there at the end talking about how much he worked. He loved his work and he loved his job, but that was not what what I think of him day to day, right? So there is more to life than work, and we want to make sure we have time to do that. And the time is now. It's not once you get past that next thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Do it now. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending your time with us.
Thank you for trusting me with your audience. I appreciate that.
Oh.
Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills, and until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.